Ladies and gentlemen, I cannot believe this, but in my hands right now is getting on for £5,000 of dollars worth of graphics card. I mean, I'm not suggesting that you go out and buy 2 of these things, but obviously last week we tested the brand new GPU from Nvidia, the 5090. We looked at the Founders Edition. It pretty much did what it needed to do. If you want the fastest GPU, it's absolutely going to be the pick for you. But on the desk here today, we're actually going to be looking at some AIB cards. So we've got the Gamerock from Palit, which is one of the top-end air-cooled cards. And then we also have one of these new liquid-cooled cards from MSI. Things I'm looking out for here, are they obviously going to be pre-overclocked with more performance? Are they going to be quieter? And fundamentally, are they actually going to have less coil whine? Because that was the main weakness with the Founders Edition. It's going to be pretty interesting, and we are also, of course, going to be asking the question whether either of these two things could possibly be worth the almost certain extra price tag versus the Founders Edition. So join us to learn absolutely everything you need to know right after a short word from this video's sponsor. Ladies and gentlemen, the 4000D has returned anew with Corsair's Frame 4000D. This brand new case sees improvements left, right and centre, with a fully modular design for complete customization and an increase to the length to support larger graphics cards, with up to 405mm of clearance when using front fans. It supports 2 360 radiators at the same time, BTF, Project Zero and Stealth motherboards, and it even has a GPU anti-sag arm to look after your sparkly new 50 series graphics card. Learn more about this monumental case today with the link down below. And unbelievably for me, I'm going to kick this video off very unprofessionally with some notes. I know guys. Because obviously the most important thing really when it comes to choosing a graphics card is not only going to be the way it runs, so how cool, how quiet, what the temps are, but the performance. And a lot of this is dictated by the boost clock of the GPUs themselves. And spoiler alert, you don't have to buy an AIB card whatsoever, or even one of the high spec ones just to get an overclock, because you can do that yourself for free with something like MSI Afterburner, with the Nvidia app. There's so many tools, and to be honest with you, as I'm sure we'll find out later in the video, I imagine most of these cards are going to be the same unless we run into thermal limitations. So we could maybe put extra power into these cards, and in something like this that obviously has a water cooler, so in theory is going to have lower temperatures, obviously you can push it further. But quite how much extra performance you're going to get out of that depends on the generation of the GPU, the architecture, and then obviously the exact build that they've done with it themselves. Now, the Founders Edition has a boost clock of around about 2.41. This Palit card, which is obviously a bigger air-cooled card, steps it up to 2527, whereas if you want to go all the way to the max, you're looking at something like this, which is the Suprim Liquid from MSI, that goes up to 2580. And I know that this is probably not the way Palit would want their card marketed, sorry guys, but in a way it kind of went from a little bit of a joke product when they first launched it, because it was like over-the-top RGB. That was the thing about it, the reason to buy it. Whereas I think they've gone down the much more serious route actually of trying to appeal to everyone really, while still having maybe a slightly more out there design, but something that is a lot more tasteful and something that is a lot less reliant on bling. I mean, you definitely can see that this is still going to stand out, but personally speaking, I think this kind of like hits the brief perfectly really, because yeah, it is still a little bit more out there, but also, if this was one of the few cards that was in stock, let's say, this wouldn't stop most people from buying it, because when you actually get hold of it, you can see this is what most people are going to see when they put it in their system. I imagine this will light up and you have a load of RGB, which will look quite nice. But dare I say, actually for a Gamerock card, it is pretty tasteful. You've got this 12-pin power connection as well. Obviously, you've got the sense pins for a total of 16. Addressable RGB header on this as well, if you want to kind of synchronize your lighting with everything, really. I mean, it is a big graphics card, make no mistake about it, but I don't think this is going to be the absolute largest one you can get, which may well mean that in terms of thermals and things, this isn't the absolute best, but it doesn't have to be the best, it just has to be enough, and it has to cost the right price, because at the moment we still don't have pricing on either of these. As soon as I get it, I will put it here and here. On the back, that you do have this little back plate as well that feels like metal, which is quite nice. This is one of their more premium ones. You can get cheaper Palit cards, and if you're looking at an extra like £200, £300, £400 with these sort of graphics cards, then the value goes out of the window. I know some people will literally pay anything for the top, but that doesn't necessarily make it worth buying, does it? This is what a 3080 would kind of look like. This is a 3070 Ti. You can see much bigger than that, way thicker as well. I mean, actually, let's use the overhead and do this properly. So there is the Gamerock. Here is the 4080/4090 cooler. Then we have the 4090 Aorus Master. Then we have the 3070 Ti and the 4060 Ti, so definitely the baby of the group. Then actually, because I'm feeling really nice and generous here today, here is the 2080 Ti Founders, again, doing a little bit of a comparison. So somehow we've gone from this to this. So that is the Gamerock that obviously we expect to be cheaper than the Suprim Liquid. The real definition of all-out overkill. Almost forgot for a second there that we do of course have a radiator attached to this. There's just so much box, isn't there? Right, let's get that out of the way. Here we are. So 360 rad on this. But yes, here we are. We do have our Suprim Liquid. And I've got to say, it's a pretty decent looking GPU. Do be aware that this is quite tall though, so do factor that in when you're kind of selecting your case and stuff like that. But in terms of obviously physical size, it is a fair bit smaller. We can do a little peel here actually, can't we? What an absolute delight that is. Give that like a 5 out of 10. But yeah, you've got this kind of brushed metal on the front. I don't want to touch it too much because I'll leave marks. You've got a slightly crystalline effect on the Suprim logo here. I've got to say, a lot of MSI's cards this year have definitely been very over the top. They've almost been going the opposite approach to Palit, where they've been going like more gamery, which I'm not sure I'm a fan of all of them. I like my things to be very tasteful, so this is exactly up my alley. Big fan of this. On the back, you do also have this little kind of like diamond logo there. You've got a mode selector for silent and gaming. Again, obviously we have our up to 600 watt power connection. So if you are going to overclock this, you can probably only put about an extra 25 watts or so in. On the side of this as well, don't forget that one of the brand new, I keep saying brand new series, brand new features of 50 series is the fact that we do of course have 3 DisplayPort 2.1Bs and then 1 HDMI 2.1B. So if you don't want to use DisplayStream compression, then you can do 4K 240 Hz without any, which is quite cool. But if you are willing to use DSC, which let's be honest, most people are, you can do 4K 480 Hz, or you can do 120 Hz at 8K. But I mean, realistically, how many people are going to be doing that? Now, in terms of the radiator section of this, it's not actually the thickest thing I've seen in the world. That's probably not an issue, but an easier way for them to have got even better thermals would obviously to make that bigger. But maybe that means it doesn't need to be that big. Quick size comparison for you though, so you can see all of the differences. So as expected, much smaller if you kind of disregard the bulk. And then we will throw in our MasterCard, which is still the biggest of the lot, our original 4080. And then if we can just about squeeze it in there, look, our 2080 Ti. This is a water-cooled card, and yet it's still bigger than a 2080 Ti Founders. It is ridiculous, isn't it, when you take out such a small card like the 4070 and you're replacing it with that. But that is exactly what we are going to place inside. I mean, actually, that doesn't look too bad, does it? I mean, it's quite well balanced in this system, but obviously it is a very big case. You can go bigger. This is the King 65, again, full build that we did with this top right corner of your screen. But yeah, you're not going to be putting this in a small chassis, and you do want to make sure you have loads of good ventilation and airflow. They have toned it down a bit. That doesn't look like a Gamerock anymore. It was like a guilty pleasure of mine, just how over the top it was. Now we just have this little logo that says Gamerock. All of that bling is on the underside. There it is, look. That's what it's all about. This is basically a card you need to put in a vertical GPU mount. That is night and day. How have they designed it like that? It's like a completely different card. Because you've got all of that quite attractive RGB, but no one is ever going to be able to see that unless you've got it in a vertical GPU mount. Rightio then, ladies and gentlemen, I do believe we are now all set up and ready to go. We did have a bit of a weird reporting bug, but I've restarted the system and that seems to have resolved itself. So we should have accurate figures, and this is currently DLSS Super Resolution set to performance, and we have path tracing enabled but no frame gen. And it does look like the frame rate is very similar, but I must admit I'm a little bit disappointed. I'm not entirely sure what or why, but our clock speed is actually a fair bit lower. At the moment, we're only getting 2,430, whereas we should be hitting a decent improvement to that. Now, in terms of thermals and things, obviously this is going to be the most interesting bit really for those that are buying it from the cooler point of view. And that is, at the moment, we're getting around about 71 to 73 degrees, but it is quite a cold day. I'm in a t-shirt, but I think the rim in here is probably about 22 and a half degrees, so it's not particularly warm. But in terms of your acoustic test, I would actually say that is a little bit louder than the Founders Edition, but there's really not that much in it. And crucially, in terms of coil whine, I'm not actually hearing it. I did hear it earlier when we were in the menus, and it was pretty horrible, to be honest. But If it's only in the menus when you're at one of those like ridiculous frame rates where you're not capped, that's obviously not an issue. So yeah, I would say this is kind of what you expect your graphics card to sound like, really. It makes some noise, but it's very easy to forget. It's in the background. It's not in any way loud. It's just a low hum that's continuously going in the background. So actually, so far, even though it's slightly louder, in a way, it's kind of easier to get on with than the Founders Edition. There are pros and cons to both. Well, this is interesting because changing now to Star Wars Outlaws, it does appear that our clock speed is still capping out at 2430, which again, I find very, very strange. Let's see if we could do ourselves a bit of a side-by-side though with our Founders Edition once again. So now all of that frame generation has been turned off entirely. We still have super resolution enabled, of course, but we're getting around about 64, 65 FPS as our base. Oh wait, I'm gonna have to mount a radiator, aren't I? Didn't think about that. I mean, we're just gonna have to put this down the bottom. You wouldn't really want to do this real world because obviously you want the pump to be at the bottom of your loop, and the pump, I believe, is in the graphics card rather than the radiator. Then you're gonna remember that your fans are currently set to exhaust, so you're gonna have to swap them around to be intakes if you are putting that at the bottom. They don't look very nice from this side though, just as an FYI. Let's now drop this into position, and I'll say that this is not actually the best case for this because I don't think there's actually an easy way to get this fitted down at all. You could maybe drill some holes and go through, but they kind of want you to use those long screws that screw into the chassis, which doesn't really work when you're using like a large radiator or something. So you might be able to get creative a different way, but just for testing purposes, I'm just gonna hover this rather than screw it down. And I mean, it's all connected, so this should work. Should. I mean, there's not really that much to it. I mean, as I say, I quite like minimal stuff. This is very much a radiator with some black fans on it, and then, as I say, a more tasteful GPU with a little white light on it. I imagine that's RGB, so you could change it, but as I say, there's not really too much to it. This is for those that just want the best performance possible and aren't so fussed about aesthetics. But other than the tubes, I would say the whole thing looks quite good, but 2 AIOs in a single system, never really the best look. This is it then, folks. This is quite literally the big one. Are we gonna see any differences for what is probably gonna be among the most expensive, but hopefully the best performing 5090s? Let's find out. And I'm pleased to say that our clock speed is now way better than anything we've seen before. 2820, which is more than you will get from the Founders Edition. I can say that the system is very, very quiet, but we'll do a proper test in just a second. And I mean, in terms of frame rate, actually, it does look as if we are getting a slightly higher frame rate than before. Nothing crazy. Our Founders Edition, you were kind of like mid-80s, mid to low 80s, 80 to 85. Whereas here it looks like we're kind of 85 to 90. Now this could just be placebo, this could be a different part of the map, or it could be because our clock speed has increased, so we are getting more performance. I mean, that's definitely what it should be, right? And I mean, this is kind of the experience that I would want. I would expect if I was going to spend even more money, granted with a little bit extra faff to install it, but the setup and installation, once you've got that out of the way, for it to just work, for it to be overclocked and know you are getting the best performance possible. So that's not too shabby. But interestingly enough, we're not actually using more power. We're pretty much bang on 500 watts at the moment. So this is very, very interesting, I've got to say. Instead then, let's move across to something that, to be honest, is even more beautiful. This is some Indiana Jones. This is a great example, actually, when you have this light coming in. You can just see it looks ultra realistic. So once again, might be ever so slightly than the Founders Edition, but don't expect like a night and day difference. GPU is staying at around about 2840. We were seeing a little bit of droop before. Hopefully that's not going to continue. I mean, I'll give you one last noise test, actually. I mean, bear in mind, this system is consuming a lot of power, around about 625 watts. It's not doing a bad job of cooling whilst not making much noise. If you are looking to buy any of these cards really for the extra performance that you're going to get from it, I'm pretty confident you'd be able to unlock that just by doing a manual overclock anyway. So it doesn't really matter what card you have as long as it can actually accommodate the amount of heat it's going to put out at acceptable noise levels and temperatures. You're probably going to get similar performance among all of them, and as I say, you can tune all of them anyway if you want to maybe undervolt it, or if you want to just get a smidgen more clock speed, just to know you're getting the best FPS possible, really. The Suprim, though, I've got to admit, has actually impressed me. Now, obviously, it is extra cost, and I'm going to say that for most people that are looking at 5090 who already have stupid amounts of money that they want to spend on a graphics card anyway, it's probably not worth you paying the extra money if you can get hold of a Founder Edition, because although that card does have more coil whine, it's still very, very quiet, right? And especially if you're going to put your PC under your desk, I don't really think you're going to notice that much of a difference. However, having said that, in my eyes, there's no doubt this is the best 5090 I've tested so far. I mean, I've only tested 3, so there's definitely a long way to go, but it's fundamentally a lot quieter than the other 2 cards. It has less coil whine, or at least less noticeable coil whine. Would I pay 50, 75 pounds more? Yes. Would I pay an extra almost certainly £200-300 more? No. So let us know your thoughts down in the comment section below. What do you think of 50 series so far? Are you buying a 5090? And if you are, would you consider going for something as ridiculous as the Supreme, or do you kind of agree with me that if you can get hold of the Founders Edition, that is the best all-rounder despite the coil whine? We'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Smash the like button if you enjoyed this though, get yourself subscribed, and if you do want to check out current pricing on anything that's in this system, you can find this and all of the graphics cards linked down below with our affiliate links. And while you're down there, why not check out the new Corsair Frame 4000D? Working as the perfect blend of size and compatibility, this affordable chassis comes with or without fans, has extra ventilation down the bottom, and larger mesh cutouts on the front for power-hungry components. It's also designed to be as easy to build in as possible, with modular components and the InfiniRail fan mount system that supports 120, 140, and even 200mm fans on the front. Get your build on today with Corsair, check out the link down below. But thank you guys so much for watching, we'll catch you in the next one.